I was going to say that with regard to Sabine being trained, even though I don't know the relationship about Sabine and Ahsoka being master and Padawan or whatever, if it was shown, I don't know in previous episodes. I didn't necessarily have a problem with that because one of the things that I don't like that Lucas introduced was this idea of the midi-chlorians. And so as far as I'm concerned, midi-chlorians can just go away. I'm not opposed to critiquing George Lucas and the prequels at all. So that idea, in fact, one of the better ideas, and I'm not, even though I didn't like the sequels, I'm not opposed also to saying when they've got a good idea, is the idea of that boy when he pulls the broom to him at the very end, that the Force is out there. It's something that manifests. I thought that was desperately needed because I just need to forget the existence of midi-chlorians. So the idea that somebody else, obviously we have the idea of the Force being powerful in families. Luke, Yoda talks about that with regard to Luke and things like that. But I didn't have a problem with the idea that it's something that you can develop, and it's not something that's just determined by your biology and your midi-chlorians that can go away, as far as I'm concerned. But I recognize from a storytelling perspective that we're actually in conflict here, because the storytelling thing, if you're doing the hero's journey, and you could totally do the hero's journey with Sabine Wren, the importance, it seems like it comes up, the storytelling beat that comes up, and so we're talking about something deep and psychological here, that the hero, even though they are the will-be hero, even though right now they're a farmer or they're just somebody who lives in an apartment like Sabine or whatever, somebody who is insignificant, has some type of connection with something much greater. And so if you have that connection, so it's very easy to do that through a bloodline, that gives you that connection. Oh, your father was somebody, or your mother, or whatever. Your family is something. So from a storytelling perspective and an archetypical perspective, that idea of you being special because of some kind of connection to your bloodline or ancestry, which we've talked about before on the show.
Yeah, sacred fire elements.
The sacred fire element is very important. So having that is an important storytelling element that we connect with and we see over and over again is important. But then
don't tie it down.
that conflicts with the idea that maybe anyone could be a Jedi if they practiced hard enough.
Yeah, see, my sense was always that being a Jedi was something that was accessible to a lot of life forms, if not all, but some people were gifted by being strong with it. So I did not like the midi-chlorians. I don't know why he biologicalized it.
I don't know either.
It was more interesting as a mystical energy field. This idea that you could learn it. And as a Skywalker, he was especially strong with it. It's like an athlete who is really gifted early on. I even wrote in my notes a long time ago about storytelling that you have the character like in like Parzival. You have a character who's the not likely hero who goes on to do the great thing, and also that you have this hero design of someone who is blessed with greatness who has to live up to this now. So I think you could work with the Force on both levels. The janitor who becomes a Jedi Knight versus the pedigree of a prince who falls short. I didn't like the scene at the end of Last Jedi with the broom, not because it was a bad idea of the Force, though. I agree with you that it's a good idea of the Force, but that's your ending shot to a Star Wars canon film about the Skywalker. Anyway, it didn't work there, but I think I agree with you on the point that it was sorely needed to open up the Force in the universe.
Yes.
Totally.
And the midi-chlorians were mentioned in The Phantom Menace, and then they were mentioned again in Revenge of the Sith. And it's like, and actually their mention could have been just deleted. And I had to say, if I was editing that, it's like, let's just delete that, because the Emperor, or the will-be Emperor Palpatine, says something like it's something like he used the Force through the midi-chlorians to bring the person back to life. And I'm looking at that like, let's just not mention midi-chlorians. We can just say he used the Force to bring that person back to life, and then we just don't have to bring up the embarrassing midi-chlorians again.
I wouldn't even mind.
It'll work just fine.
I wouldn't even mind if the final edit of the film had like beeps, like he used a beep to use the Force.
Do not tell us about midi-chlorians.
Just blot it out. I agree.
Yeah. So my point was, I understand. I know that it's controversial, Sabine, with that, because people will talk about different things that George Lucas has said about the Force and whether or not you have to be born with some kind of Force aptitude and blah, 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 blah. and I'm sure that there have been many contradictory things actually said. If you're like watching, I'm sure there are contradictory things that are said. But to me, from the kinds of things that we talk about, it's the conflict in the storytelling perspective. Like, what is the storytelling perspective? Look, James, since I may have gone too far in a few places.
That's like the quote of the. It's like it's so funny because Lucas even knew I may have gone too far.
Yeah, like the guy with the long, like the Jedi with like the 5-foot neck. Not necessary. Not necessary. Man. Really not something that we had to have, George. Like that would have been fine to not have.
Well, for the most part, I'm still a huge George Lucas fan. I'm not above criticizing him. I could definitely see. I mean, he's human. He's definitely not like the perfect storyteller, but he has given us some of the greatest stories of all time, and some of the wonkiest. But getting back to Ahsoka, it's funny that I noticed like you keep mentioning Sabine, and it's making me wonder. I was like, I think this comes across as Sabine's story. Like,
I think it does,
because I kept thinking to myself, I was like, I would open with Ahsoka and Anakin and really establish where she comes from in the Star Wars lore. And when you kept saying Sabine, I'm like, Sabine shouldn't be on Heath's mind this much, but the show is, and it's funny because every time you said it, I realized like there's so much Sabine. Even the big introductory scene, Ahsoka's was the slow, Indiana Jones thing. Sabine's was like the on the bike and ditching stuff. Like she had more of the flair. I guess it wasn't well done, but they tried harder to introduce a character with her. They did not introduce a character with Ahsoka. Her going into a temple and then beating up stupid droids is not much of a character development, in my opinion.
Well, she could start that way. If she started that way, able to do that, and she can still do that. There's no arc there in development. So
yeah, big deal. And she does move slow. And someone pointed out, and I couldn't help but notice it, how many of the women have their arms folded? Hera, Ahsoka, and Sabine. There's all these scenes with them like this. And it's like, yeah, that's right. That's a defensive position when someone's like that. So, and Ahsoka in the cartoons was never, I don't think she ever did that. She was always very open and woman of action-ish,
Well, you mentioned that you didn't think that it was as stoic and everything like that. But I felt when Hattie, Shin Hattie, or Hattie, or whatever, however you pronounce the last name, but who generally I was pro, but when she's flying in on the ships, she's got, to me, she had the same kind of stoic kind of voice that, like, I forget exactly what the lines were, but, she's flying and she's like, we'll get them, go that way. And I was like, she's acting in the same way.
But you know what made the scenes work in the dogfighting? You don't have to be animated when you're flying a ship, but look out the window once in a while. Like even in the Clone Wars, they would show guys, someone's behind you. He would look, and then he would look, and there was other, they look up above them. If someone's getting hit, like, oh my God, they look out their window. If someone crashes, Luke looks. Like, show me some of that. You don't have to be like,
right. Yeah,
you know what I'm saying? Like, because that's what dogfighting is. Like, there was flashing lights, and you would see like Wedge squint from the flashing light or turn, and there was all of this action out the windows. Watch Empire Strikes Back when they're in the snow speeders and A New Hope. There's always action out the windows, and the action actually follows sense. Like if the Millennium Falcon comes in and shoots somebody and it cuts, you could see the explosion out the window of the other starfighter. Thanks, Wedge. Good shooting, Wedge. There was logic to the chaos, and we could follow it all through their canopy windows. I know this because I remember when Independence Day came out, I think 1996, and they had all this dogfighting against the alien ship, and I was like, what's wrong with this? Why isn't this as good as Star Wars? My answer, I can't see out their canopy. Star Wars, I could see above, side. I could get a good feel for their spatial awareness, even in space, and the action and what they were escaping and doing and seeing, all based on that pilot's ability to move around in that canopy. And so when they just sit there like this, you're not doing anything.
Yeah,
you don't.
They should. There were opportunities for her to be more animated. And I just felt when I saw her, like, I was like, oh my God, she's doing the same thing.
But that's a director.
It is. It's a director's problem. They must want it that way. The director must want it that way.
Well, but the director has to decide how they want to do the action. All I'm saying is, like I said, this is a 6 out of 10 for me, not a 10 out of 10 or anything even close. But they got more right than they got wrong in episode 3 for me. Whereas in episodes 1 and 2, I felt like they got very little right, if anything. And I'm hoping, because the Clone Wars started with a movie that was really bad. It's the worst Star Wars film of all time.
I had forgotten about that.
Yeah.
When
so it
you were talking
started
about introducing with the movie. Yeah.
Yeah. It started very poorly and built up momentum. And Dave Filoni did the end of I think Positive Fandom mentioned this. He did the last 4 episodes of Clone Wars season 7, which was Disney on Disney Plus, and they're some of the best Star Wars made. Ahsoka Tano fights Darth Maul, and not briefly. Like, it is an epic, visually beautiful, amazing cinematography battle. Good dialogue, good action. I love the last 4 episodes of us. So this is the group that gave us that. Under this regime, they're capable of giving us some Star Wars. But man, I feel like you gotta lead. You gotta start strong in this era of Star. You don't have years to build momentum. You got a very disenfranchised fan base. People are quick to pull the trigger. And after so much bad Star Wars, if there's a whiff of more bad Star Wars, people are going to tune out.